Oh my god, dude. Okay, we're lost.
No. The exit's like right over here. I remember.
No, we haven't been this way before.
Yeah, we have. Do you like caves? See, I've been working on a game for a few months now that combines the monster slaying of The Witcher with the combat mechanics of Elden Ring and an overarching roguelike format similar to games like Slay the Spire and Hades, all being set in a terrifying cave system filled with eldritch horrors. There's a huge problem that stood in my way. Caves are irregular and chaotic in nature, and there's two main ways to generate them in video games. The first is to use pre-made, handcrafted assets. This is what you'll see in games like The Forest. The second is to procedurally generate them, although this does limit you in a way that necessitates a low poly or 2D approach. You can't have both. Or can you? I want that polished, handcrafted look. However, half the fun of exploring a cave is not knowing what's around the next bend. I want the cave to generate in a new layout every single time the player enters it. That's why I had to come up with a never-before-seen technique to create a cave system that feels like the real deal. Let's dive into the fascinating world of cave generation. But why are caves so important to me? Well, I'll never forget my first visit to Mammoth Cave National Park. The endless winding tunnels, the eerie darkness, the sense of foreboding left an indelible impression on me. And that's when the inspiration struck. The impending sense of dread, not knowing what's around the next twist in the rocks. This would be the ultimate experience for a game. But it was just that, an idea. How do we generate this cave? My initial approach was to combine handcrafted prototypes with procedural generation. I'd experimented with this idea before using a wave function collapse algorithm to generate basic terrain. Using pre-made tiles and adding constraints, I was able to generate little cities. It's still very grid-like, but let's investigate this a little bit more. I scalped some cheap cave assets that I found for about $10 and formatted them in Blender to create tiles for intersections, straights, corners, and more. When I plugged them into my wave function collapse algorithm, the result was decent, but let's be honest, it's pretty boring and brings us right back to the initial problem. It's just grid-like, it's not cavey enough. That's where I hit a major roadblock in my game development journey. Was it even possible to achieve what I had in mind? The whole point of generating the caves was to increase the amount of new and unique experiences for the player. And as an indie dev with a full-time job, I only have so much time to work on this project. I spent several nights up after work way too late attempting prototype after prototype after prototype until one early morning in February, I had a breakthrough. I want to introduce you to a game that completely revolutionized the way that I thought about procedural generation. It's called Townscaper. It's a cozy little city building game developed by Oscar Stolberg. And the thing that caught my attention is the unique, irregular flow of the grid layout. The tiles are not divided simply into columns and rows, but instead they flow in somewhat different directions. This game replicates the streets of a medieval city better than anything I've seen before. Now, Oscar has an incredible Twitter where he goes in depth into how he achieved this look, so after taking a mountain load of notes, I gave it a shot. We start by generating a grid of points. The shape doesn't matter much, but hexagons are pretty, so here we are. Next, we're going to connect all the points, creating an array of triangles. Now, it's super important to structure the data in a way that you can keep track of which triangles share which edges, because next, we're going to select edges at random that are shared between triangles and collapse them. This creates four-sided quads. There's a few triangles left over, of course, but that's fine, it'll actually add to the irregularity. Next, we're going to subdivide them, creating little four-sided faces in the center of each shape. And then finally, we're going to relax the quads by shifting the vertices to more closely resemble a square. This was probably the most difficult part for me, but it gets rid of a lot of the really hard corners that make it look inorganic. The best part about this irregular grid is that each quad has exactly four sides, making it perfect for that previously mentioned wave function collapse algorithm. So that is exactly what I did, and I'm demonstrating here using some Cinti tiles since it's hard to see with the cave prefabs. It's a bit tricky to squish square meshes into the irregular shapes, but luckily a little bit of calculus later and we got the desired result. It's a huge improvement, but it's still flat, which is not how a cave naturally generates. I was able to resolve this though by generating a Perlin noise map and sampling it at each vertex, then pushing each vertex up or down. The final result is an irregular grid of prefabs that's a vibe. Although I love how cozy and peaceful it is right now, I'm going to swap out the tiles for the cave prefabs, and we have finally achieved our result. They look pretty basic to start, but we can load them up with a ton of details. It's no longer a grid, but an organic system of irregular grids, which is perfect for this cave game. So now that we know that the game is even possible, let's discuss how it's going to work. You'll start off in the forest, and you come across a nasty hole in the ground. You're going to need to explore it. You'll find vendors stationed there around the area where you can buy gear and equipment from to help you on your journey. The plan is to stack multiple cave systems on top of each other, and as you descend down, it's going to increase both in difficulty and reward. You know, like Terraria or some shit like that. I don't come up with ideas, I just steal them from better games. Now, let's talk about combat. I've built out a robust system that's particularly inspired by Sebastian Graves' Dark Souls and Unity series. He actually just started an Elden Ring in Unity series, definitely check it out. But anyway, some of the highlights include rolling, swords with combo abilities, shields, spears, intelligent enemy AI that can block, dodge, parry, bosses, poison, archery system, loot system, armor system. It's very fleshed out, but it will require an entire video to go more into detail on this in the future. So if you want to see that, you should subscribe. I also wanted to integrate multiplayer as I have a pretty good grasp of it, and exploring the caves with friends would make it an even better experience. I even set up some client prediction and server reconciliation. If you don't know what any of that means, that's fine. If you do know, yeah, it's some good shit right there. Speaking of touching grass, I recently went rock climbing with some friends and took a good look at the rocks. We have a ton of room for improvement on that graphical front. Specifically, I'm not sure if we want to go with high poly to really add realism to the environment and terror to the monsters, or if we want to go with a mix. So I've been experimenting with both to determine the style. I do love using these Cinti assets for prototyping as it's a lot cheaper than spending thousands on high poly. I can always do that later when the game is almost done. By the way, Cinti is currently having a major sale with up to 70% off. You can check out with my affiliate link down below.
That is shameless.
Now, you may be wondering why I'm working on this and paused development on our previous project, Tavern Team. Well, I learned a very valuable lesson. The main issue is that the gameplay loop itself wasn't fun to play again and again. You know, you can only fill a mug so many times before you want to throw it at a customer. And now that I say that out loud, I realize that that is actually the opening bit of like a 10-part devlog. Probably should have seen that coming. Look, life is short, so I wanted to spend the time that I do have working on something that I think is worth it. The good news is that I was able to reuse a lot of the code that I had already written. Integrating the new game with Steam only took about a weekend. I was able to reuse old scripts for setting up gear and weapons icons. I now realize that I took the wrong approach when developing it. I worked on features like character creation because I thought it would make a fun video. It did. But in reality, I should have spent more time trying to create a fun gameplay loop first and worrying about polish later. Now, the good news is I've learned my lesson that'll make this game 10 times better. That lesson being to get player feedback as soon as possible, which is why I want to launch a demo version of this game on Steam as soon as I can. If you guys are at all interested in checking that out, subscribe. It's free. Thank you.